Chevrolet built a secret weapon to win the greatest races in the world. It was so fast, so light, and so brutal that it embarrassed everyone it raced, including its own factory. They planned to build 125 of them. In the end, only 5 were ever made. And when the bosses at General Motors found out what it had done, they were furious. They wanted every last one to quietly disappear. One man refused to let that happen. He moved the cars out the back door and handed them to privateer racers. This is the story of the Corvette Grand Sport, the car Chevrolet built in secret to crush Carroll Shelby's Cobra. A car so good that the company that created it tried to erase it, and the engineer who risked everything to save it. To understand why it existed, go back to the early 1960s. The Chevrolet Corvette was America's sports car. Beautiful, powerful, and a point of national pride. But on the racetrack, a new enemy had appeared. His name was Carroll Shelby. Shelby was a Texan racer with a simple, brilliant idea. He took a light British roadster and stuffed a small Ford 5.8 into it. He called it the Cobra. It was tiny, it was vicious, and it weighed almost nothing. Soon Ford money was behind it, and Shelby's ambitions grew. He wanted to beat Ferrari, and he wanted to bury the Corvette. On the track, the Cobra did something nobody expected. It started beating the Corvette, badly. For Chevrolet, this was humiliating. Their proud Corvette was being run over by a backyard special. Something had to be done, and one man already had a plan. That man was Zora Arkus-Duntov. If anyone was the father of the Corvette, it was Zora. He was a brilliant engineer, a racer, and a fighter. Born in Belgium and raised across Europe, he had lived a dozen lives before Detroit. He had even raced at Le Mans and won his class behind the wheel. He did not just design cars, he drove them hard. He had spent years turning the Corvette from a soft cruiser into a real sports car. He gave it fuel injection, sharper handling, and a racer's heart. And he hated losing. Watching the Cobra beat his car was personal. Zora knew exactly what it would take to win. Not a tuned-up street car, a purpose-built racing machine. Something lighter and faster than anything Shelby could dream of. But there was one enormous problem standing in his way. And it came from inside his own company. Years earlier, the American car industry had made a promise. In 1957, the major manufacturers agreed to stop factory racing. It was called the AMA ban. It was born after a series of terrible crashes and pressure from Washington. The idea was simple. Car makers would stop glorifying speed. No factory teams, no racing budgets, no company-built race cars. On paper, everyone agreed. In private, some quietly cheated. But General Motors took that promise very seriously. The men at the top wanted nothing to do with motorsport. So, if Zora wanted to build a racing Corvette, he could not ask for permission, because the answer would always be no. If he was going to do this, he would have to do it in the shadows. So that is exactly what he did. Zora started a secret project hidden deep inside Chevrolet, a skunkworks operation that officially did not exist. He found a quiet ally in a senior executive named Bunky Knudsen. Knudsen loved performance, and he understood Zora. Quietly, an unofficial budget appeared. Parts were ordered under vague names. Work happened behind closed doors. Only a handful of trusted people knew the full picture. On paper, nothing was being built. In reality, Zora was creating a monster. A car designed for one purpose only: to destroy the Cobra and to take on the best of Europe. What Zora built was not really a Corvette at all. It only looked like one. Underneath the familiar Stingray shape was a custom tubular space frame. Light, strong, and built like a pure racing car. It rode on 4-wheel disc brakes, exotic technology for the time. The body panels were made of ultra-thin fiberglass. So thin you could almost see light through them. Every unnecessary gram was stripped away. Stripped to the bone, it could weigh as little as around 1,900 pounds. That was roughly 1,000 pounds lighter than a normal Corvette. Into this featherweight body went a special aluminum V8, a 377 cubic inch small block. On the dyno, the aluminum motor was chasing as much as 550 horsepower. And even in race trim, it made well over 480. Huge power, in a car that weighed almost nothing. The numbers were staggering for 1963. Zora called it the Grand Sport. He aimed it at the toughest races on Earth: Sebring, Daytona, Le Mans. On paper, it could outrun the Cobra, the Ferrari, everything. But to race it, there was a rule. To compete in the GT class, you had to build a road-going version. The plan was to build 125 Grand Sports. Enough to make it legal to race. The skunkworks raced to hit that number, and then the secret got out. Word climbed up the ladder to the very top of General Motors. And the bosses were not happy. They reminded everyone of the racing ban, and they shut it down. The order was final. Stop. Now. Of the 125 planned, only 5 had been finished. 5 cars with nowhere to race. By the rules, 5 cars were nowhere near enough. Without the full production run, they could never be homologated for the class they were built to win. Officially, the Grand Sport was dead. It could not be sold to the public, and the factory could not race it. But Zora was not finished. At the end of 1963 came an event called the Nassau Speed Week. It was held on a sunny island in the Bahamas. Drivers, teams, and millionaires came to race in the winter sun. And here was the loophole. Nassau was not an official championship race. It was a wild anything-goes party of speed, which meant the factory could quietly look the other way. The Grand Sports were handed to a private team. A wealthy Texan named John Mecom took them under his wing. They were entered not by Chevrolet, but by privateers. Behind the wheel sat some of the greatest names in racing: Roger Penske, Jim Hall, Dick Thompson, Augie Pabst. The cars wore privateer colors, but everyone knew where they came from. And then the racing started. What happened next became a legend. The Grand Sports did not just beat the Cobras. They demolished them. Lap after lap, the Corvettes pulled away. At their best, they were pulling away by several seconds a lap. Several seconds. An eternity in racing. The Cobras that had tormented the Corvette finally had no answer. For once, Shelby's giant killers were the ones being beaten. It was a total, crushing victory. To be fair, this was a purpose-built racer with a bigger engine facing production-based Cobras. It was never quite an even fight. Zora's secret monster had done exactly what he built it to do, but the win was so complete that it created a new problem. By some accounts, it was an embarrassment even to Chevrolet itself. The cars that supposedly did not exist had just dominated in public. And back in Detroit, the bosses were watching. The reaction from the top of General Motors was swift and cold. The Grand Sport had broken the rules in front of the whole world. It had proven the racing ban was being ignored. And the men in charge wanted the evidence gone. The order came down from the executive floor, where racing was still a forbidden word. The 5 Grand Sports were supposed to quietly disappear, scrapped and forgotten as if they had never been built. It is one of the most ruthless decisions in American car history, an order to destroy 5 of the greatest machines ever made, simply because they had won too well. But Zora Arkus-Duntov could not do it. He had poured his soul into these cars. He would not watch them crushed. So he did the only thing he could. Quietly, before the order could be carried out, he moved them. The Grand Sports were sold off to private racers and collectors. Out of the factory, out of reach, safe. Zora gambled his own career to save them. Some of them kept racing for years in private hands. Into 1964, 2 of the 5 were cut down into open roadsters. They lined up at Sebring against the finest cars in the world. The little secret from Chevrolet had become a true giant killer. And because of him, all 5 still survive today. Those 5 cars are now among the most valuable Corvettes on Earth. Worth millions, locked away in private collections and museums. When one comes up for sale, it can change hands for several $1,000,000. They are proof of what Chevrolet could have done if it had been allowed, and of one engineer who refused to lose and refused to give up. The men who drove them went on to shape motorsport itself. Roger Penske built one of the greatest racing empires in history. Jim Hall pioneered the radical, wing-topped chaparrals. And Carroll Shelby got his revenge elsewhere. His Cobra Daytona Coupe later beat Ferrari for a world title. But the score from Nassau never changed. Zora stayed at Chevrolet for years, fighting for the car he loved. He is remembered today as the godfather of America's sports car. The Grand Sport never got the championship it was built for. It was too good, too fast, and too secret to be allowed to live. But on one island, for 1 week, it answered the only question that mattered. It finally had the Cobra's measure. And then it vanished into legend.